Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you are all having a great day. And if you are not, don't worry, and remember that there is always sunshine after the rain. Are you ready for new stories? I have 3 for you today. First one is about OP's stepdad, who kicked OP's sister out of the house because she refused to wash her stepbrother's dirty clothes. Enjoy the stories, guys, and don't forget to like and comment. To make this easier, I'm going to call my stepdad Bob, stepbrother Ike, sister 18 Lisa, sister 14 Kelly. My sisters and I have always been close. Lisa and I have the same dad, who was a complete butt stain, and left our mom to move back to his home country to remarry his childhood sweetheart, and gave her no support or way to contact him. Kelly's dad was married to our mom for a few years, but they divorced on good terms. Before she got married to Bob, our mom had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet, so we all had to rely on each other and help around the house. I moved out shortly after she began dating Bob, but I always visited, and at the time, I thought he was okay. Somewhat strict guy, and I was glad Mom was happy. When they got married, everything seemed to change. Bob wanted to move across the country to California to be closer to his son, Ike, 16. Ike always visited, so we knew him pretty well, but my sisters were both upset and did not want to leave. Kelly was very close to her dad, but only spends every other weekend with him. And Lisa wanted to finish her senior year at school, since she was also taking college classes locally. Mom pretty much bribed them to go, promising Lisa to pay for college, letting her have the private room in their new house, and told Kelly that she and Bob would pay for her to fly out and visit her dad every month. None of that happened. At the new house, my sister had to share the smaller bedroom. It could only fit a bunk bed, computer desk, and some closet space. Bob said that the extra classes were too much, and Lisa could only take what the local public school offered, aka nothing. He also made Kelly take her guinea pigs to a pet shop because he didn't want them pissing on his carpets. This destroyed her since she took amazing care of her pets. He also made a rule that if they ever threatened to leave the house, they were not welcome back. He threw his oldest son out after he went to live with his mother after a fight. While my sisters had their lives uprooted, Ike was spoiled rotten in front of them. He got the private room as his man cave, even though he was sometimes there on weekdays and rarely spent the night. He never showers, and his room and the whole area around him reeks of body odor, and his laundry will go weeks unwashed unless my mom does it. Him and his dad think it's hilarious though, and joke about it, even though he grounded my sisters for not putting their clean clothes away on time. The final straw with Lisa came when she and Ike were getting ready for school, and Bob wanted her to pick up Ike's dirty clothes and put them in the wash so that Ike could go to morning practice, since he had no clean clothes for school and his smelled even worse than usual. Lisa told Ike to wash his own clothes, since she didn't want to be late for school, and Bob and her got into a pretty bad fight. He called her some awful names and said she should be grateful he even lets her stay in his house. Mom took his side and wanted her to apologize. Lisa stood her ground and went to school on time. After she left, Bob texted her to get her stuff when class ended and that she was no longer welcome. He put all her clothes into a garbage bag and changed the locks on the house. She called me, and my husband and I were able to transfer some money into her bank account so she could spend a few nights in a motel before she could get a flight to stay with us. When I confronted Mom about it, she said she stood by her husband. I don't know the full story with what happened with Kelly, but Bob and her got into a fight, and she now lives with her dad. Lisa lives with our grandma and works full-time now at 2 different jobs to save for school. I told my mom that I have no respect for her whatsoever, but I still remember her as the hard-working mom I knew growing up. I hate how she put her new marriage over us. The other night, I got a surprise message from her on Facebook. She sent Lisa an identical one. She said that during Thanksgiving, all she could see were empty chairs at her table and that she misses us. She says that Bob regrets getting in the way of our relationship and wants her to make things right. Lisa replied and asked her to message her again when Bob dies. She also told me that she would not be angry if I spoke to Mom again because she understood how cool she used to be. As a mother, I can't imagine putting another person in front of my own child. My husband and I joke about using each other as meat shields to protect our son. Kelly last saw her 5 months ago, and I know she misses her. None of us have any respect for her, and I can't imagine us having anything like our relationship was in the past. I feel like I can't put my feelings down properly in words for my mom to understand. OP should tell her that she has failed OP's sister as a mother, and that, frankly, she has made her choice. She really prioritized Ike's dirty laundry over her daughter's education. Wow. OP should tell her that Bob changed her, and she has to live with her decisions. She put her relationship with Bob over the lives of her daughters. Of course they will resent her. My wife, 51 female, and I, 55 male, have a blended family. When we got married, she had a 10-year-old son, now 25, and 6-year-old daughter, now 21. My daughter was 2, and her mom, who suffered from chronic depression, had died from a drug overdose soon after her birth, and therefore doesn't remember anything of her biological mother. My wife and I later had a son together, now aged 12. When we got married, my wife's ex-husband had begun his medical residency 2 hours away and was more of a weekend and holidays fixture in the kids' lives. I told her how much I adored her kids, and they referred to me as uncle, since I didn't want to step on her ex's toes. I felt that my wife also adored my daughter, and I told her how since she was the only mother figure my daughter has ever known, there was no reason for her to be called a stepmother, and hopefully the kids would refer to each other as only siblings, and my wife eagerly agreed. For the first 5 years of our marriage, everybody got along. My daughter was referred to as the older kid's little sister, and she called my wife Mom. I talked to a therapist about breaching the biological mom topic, but hesitated because I was agonizing over the right time. Then, my wife got pregnant and gave birth to our son. She doted on our son and told me he was a living reminder of how much I meant to her. Around that time, the other kids felt like their mother's attention was being monopolized and started feeling jealous. They started fighting among each other, and around that time, my 11-year-old told my 7-year-old that she was only a stepsister, and we had to go to therapy to deal with the fallout from that. We later also had to deal with the fact that as my younger son grew up, he had a phase where he would call my biological daughter his half-sister, but call his other older 2 siblings his sister and brother. Throughout these trials, I felt like my wife was pretty even-keeled, and nobody complained about favoritism. I contributed to both my 25 and 21-year-old's college fund. My oldest son is now in medical school, and I pay his expenses and half of his tuition, while my wife's ex pays the other half. My 21-year-old is taking a gap year for an unpaid internship, and I am paying her rent. My wife was a stay-at-home mom for most of our marriage. I own a few restaurants and a bed and breakfast. Later, my wife and I made some real estate investments, and she recently invested in property and a parking garage on her own. She mostly keeps her earnings separate. But recently, I've been having a series of rather serious health issues. I was diagnosed 6 months ago with an autoimmune condition. I think the diagnosis kind of hammered home the fact that my wife and I might be gone sooner rather than later. We started talking about wills and about how to best set her up so she could be our family's rock if I passed, likely much earlier than she will. I had toyed with the idea of having a joint will. My wife initially agreed to look into it, but after a while, she said that this wasn't going to work and that she wanted a separate will. She said that she was sorry for bringing this up when I was still so sick, but that it was nothing personal, but she thinks that when she leaves the earth, the fruits of her life should go to her own biological children, and that she has raised my daughter from age 2, and that's more than most other women would do for a child that wasn't theirs. I was shocked. I asked her how long she's felt this, and she admitted that it was easier in the early years of our marriage, especially since she was dealing with bad memories from her ex and how that affected her relationship with her biological children. But after our son was born, she said she realized she had something with her biological children that she never could have with my daughter, and that she felt like a bad mother every time she thought of leaving my daughter any money. She said her kids didn't deserve that, and she feels guilty every time she had to take time away from her older daughter in particular to give to my daughter, and if she left our daughter anything, she'd be essentially robbing her own kids. When I pointed out that I was leaving her kids and mine equal amounts of money, she told me to not take whatever I feel at her out on the kids. What do I do? Regardless of the money, I cannot imagine the shock that my daughter will feel when the woman she's called mom all her life, without a second thought, cuts her out of her will for no fault of her own. The relationship between her and her older sister in particular is filled with tension, but I think she would assume her mom loved her equally. My wife is right in her assumption that I could never fathom giving any of my kids more than the other. But this has thrown me for a loop, because the older two kids' father has a very successful practice and no other kids. And he has basically said he will pass it down to his kids and split assets evenly among the two. I had intended on giving my wife the bulk of my estate, but now I know that my businesses and money will probably end up being given all to my 3 other kids, probably way before my wife passes. I can't think of the pain that my daughter will feel. I don't know whether or not I need to prepare my daughter for that eventual reality, whether she's old enough to worry about the matter of wills and the possibility of the complexity between her mom's decision. I know my wife enough to see that this has been something she's been decided on for a long time, and she's resolute about it. I have set up my daughter's college fund single-handedly, despite me not thinking anything of it before. I now resent my wife for not even offering to help, despite the bountiful returns her investments have gotten her, which she had used to pay for numerous miscellaneous costs of our oldest son in medical school, and also to buy our 12-year-old very lavish gifts. OP's wife's favoritism has probably already hurt OP's daughter in the past. Why else would a little boy single out his sister as half-sister, but not the other two, who are just as much half-siblings? That came from OP's wife. Disgusting. And OP should not think his daughter didn't notice that the wife gave her biological children lavish gifts, and she got nothing. OP should stand up for his daughter, or his wife will screw her over. She's already manipulating OP. Don't let it out on the children, but she can. No, I'd sit her down and ask her calmly how she wants to handle the transfer of the payments for their son's grad school and daughter's rent. OP should make sure that they don't suffer for her decision. And they won't. She has the money. Obviously, she'll be taking over that part, since she made the decision that everyone should feel bad if they financially cared for anyone besides their biological children. Then I'd change my will and would leave it all to my daughter and son. I'd also speak openly with 2 stepchildren about what happened. I'm sure OP's wife has manipulated them in the past against OP's daughter, so OP needs to make sure he talks to them first before she gets to them, or OP will lose them. As for OP's wife, I'd not be able to look at her with the same eyes ever again. When I was 10, my dad married my stepmother. She was like a mother to me, really did well for me, and I love her like a mom too. She always told me she has a son who is about 10 years older than me, and that he isn't a good boy. She always said things like, he has a massive drug addiction, he's a criminal, he gets violent regularly, and he's more trouble to our family than a blessing, and that's why she doesn't have him as part of the new family after marrying my dad. I never had a reason to doubt any of this. My stepmom is now dying of cancer, and she has a few months left. A couple of weeks ago, she gave me details and asked me to find her son and personally give him a letter. I, of course, agreed. I eventually found him and went to his place today. Based on what I had heard, I was actually scared a little, but I saw something entirely different. Everything looked like a nice, great family. He was married and had 2 kids. The home looked very nice. After I introduced myself and explained what is going on and gave him the letter, he read the letter, handed it to his wife, and asked what his mom had told me about him. I told him how surprised I was and what I expected to see. I was still in shock. He actually had a sad smile and said that his mom couldn't even come up with a less vile story about his past. I asked if everything is made up, and he said yes. I asked him for his version of the events, and he told me something entirely different. His father is Asian. Apparently, my father, who died 3 years ago, had a problem with it. He never agreed to accept him as part of the family, even though he wasn't living with his mother, as he was already 21 when they married. But my dad didn't want him at all, so eventually my stepmother agreed to cut him off. I got angry at hearing this, as I never pictured my father as being R to this level. I told him that I didn't believe him, and he handed me the letter that I had just delivered him and asked me to read. I read it. My stepmother was apologizing in the letter to him for abandoning him because of my father, and said that she should have stood up for her own son instead. In the end, she wants to see him, and that's what this letter was about. I was very confused about everything, as everything I know about my dad and stepmom has been a lie. It's like I never even knew them. I was going to leave, and my stepbrother told me that once I cooled off and had time to think, we can talk again. He also said that even though our parents have done horrible things, there is nothing stopping us to make up for lost time, and he'd like to get to know me, and wants me to get to know his family, as they can be my family too, if I want. I think he is way too nice about all of this. I thought I was the one bringing him bad news, but in the end, I was the one who was more freaked out. I don't know what to think about my dad, stepmom, myself, my childhood, my stepbrother, and everything else. It's just like nothing is real anymore. I need help navigating through all of this. Maybe try to find some peace. Any suggestions? I also need help about how I'm going to talk to my stepmom, because I'm beyond furious at her, but she is terminally ill. To be totally fair, all we really know is stepmother is a convincing liar. OP doesn't know for sure if stepmom was not only lying to her about the addictions, but also lying to her son about the R. Maybe there is someone else who may know the truth. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. I'd take all the sides with a grain of salt.